Okay. So the Gemara in Bava Batra and
Bava Batra.
Ted Vav Amud Aleph. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So we are now officially beginning one of the most famous, I think, sugyas in Shas when it comes to Agarata, about the composition of Tanakh. Yes, so there's a few dapim where it talks about who wrote which Sfarim of Tanakh, the order of the Sfarim in Tanakh. There's a lot of discussion about Iyov in particular, all these dashot about Iyov. And one of the most famous of the famous sugya, one of the most famous sections of it is what we'll be learning this week, B'ezrat Hashem, which is the idea of what happened at the last 8 psukim of the Torah. Right? It says, Vayamot Sham Moshe. Vayamot Sham Moshe is the 8th to last pasuk. So who wrote the last 8 psukim if the 8th to last pasuk is Moshe died? So we'll be learning that this week. It's a famous sugya, but nonetheless, when preparing this, saw a chidush of the Vilna Gaon that's called Ne'anach Yosef that I thought was very, very gishmak. It's a good way to understand the story. And the Ben Yehoyada also at the end, he has kind of a nice pilpul on this. But more broadly, I think there's kind of a traditional way to understand this idea, and we'll see that there's maybe other ways to understand it as well. Okay? So the Gemara in Bava Batra on the Ted Vav Amud Aleph teaches as follows. Right, so as I said, it starts out by saying every sefer of Tanakh, who wrote it. It goes through a list. This sefer was written by this person, this sefer was written by this person. So now the Gemara goes and analyzes that braita. Okay, it says, Amar Yoshua katav sifro shmona psukim shebatorah. So Yoshua wrote his book, Sefer Yoshua, and he also wrote the last 8 psukim in the Torah. That's what the braita says. Okay, so Tanya Kamanda Amar shmona psukim shebatorah Yoshua katavan. So it must be that this is according to the opinion of the person who said that the last 8 psukim in the Torah was written by Yoshua. Tanya, Vayamot Sham Moshe Eved Hashem. And it asks, Efshar Moshe met v'chatav Vayamot Sham Moshe? How could Moshe, if he wrote the rest of the Torah, so how could he have written that he died? Ella, Ad Kan Katav Moshe. Moshe wrote all the way up to this pasuk, not including it. מכאן ואילך כתב יהושע. But Yoshua wrote the last 8 psukim. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. V'amila Rabbi Nechemia. Okay, so Rabbi Yehuda claims that Yoshua finished it. Amar lo Rabbi Shimon. What does Rabbi Shimon say? Efshar Sefer Torah chaser ot achat. In Parshat Vailech, which is before this, Moshe says, take this Sefer Torah and put it in the Aron and the whole thing, which implies it's complete already. But that was before Moshe died. So how can you understand that anything was missing when Moshe died? Ela ad kan HaKadosh Baruch Hu Omer. Rather, up until this point in the Sefer Torah, Hashem dictated to Moshe Rabbeinu, Moshe Omer v'Kotv. Moshe would repeat after HaKadosh Baruch Hu and write it. מכאן ואילך, but from this point on, the last 8 psukim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu Omer, Hashem would say it, Moshe כותב בדמע, right? And Moshe wrote it in tears. Okay? Why? Good. Why? Why did Moshe write it in tears?
I mean, he wrote it and couldn't say it. Wrote it but couldn't say it.
Good. Okay, so you're getting to the Ritva. Okay, good. Good. You're getting to the Ritva. Yeah.
The problem in here is that it's impossible that he wrote it. Now, we're arguing about who did write it, but it's not like, didn't Hashem tell him he was going to die? I guess it's such a spoiler alert for him to be able to
he can write that he's going to die, but he can't write that he died. That would be a lie, because he's writing, so he hasn't died yet. I think that's the...
It's a prophecy. What's wrong with writing a prophecy? I don't know. I agree. Sounds so weird.
It doesn't bother you too much.
If one of the opinions was just like Moshe wrote it, Hashem told him that's what's going to happen, and he wrote it, I wouldn't be like...
That's what this one sounds like. But he was crying.
Good. Okay, so you guys are understanding it not in the way that I always understood this, but in the way...
I think the way we were taught, like that it is tears wrote it, but it doesn't look like it doesn't...
Okay, good. So the Ritva is going to address it, right? Okay. But you're right. I think, at least the way I always thought this was traditionally understood is the Moshe Kotv bedema means that he wrote the words with tears. In other words, the actual letters were written with tears. What you guys are suggesting is it means something a little bit different. We'll see the Ritva makes that distinction, okay? Very good. Okay, Moshe כותב בדמע. כמו שנאמר להלן, ויאמר להם ברוך, מפיו יקרא אליי את כל הדברים האלה, ואני כותב על הספר בדיו. So there's a story in Sefer Yirmiyahu where he has kind of his right-hand man was Baruch ben Neriah, who was a scribe. He wrote down all of the prophecies of Yirmiyahu. So quotes a pasuk here, it says, Baruch said to certain people, right, that Yirmiyahu would dictate to me, he would say his nevuot to me, and then I would write it down in ink in the Sefer. Okay, so similarly, Moshe Rabbeinu was dictated by Hashem to him, and then he would go and he would write it. Okay? Keman Azla, who's this like? Hadam Rabbi Yeshua bar Abba Amar of Gidel Amarav. And this is actually quite interesting lahalacha. So Rav has a teaching, Shmoneh psukim shebatorah, Yachid koreh otan. So the last 8 psukim of the Torah, a Yachid is allowed to read them. So what that means is actually not 100% clear, but the Rambam in the Mishnah Torah, he brings down that means that you can actually read in shul, you can take out a Sefer Torah and read the last psukim of the Torah, you don't need a minyan to do it, in order to read from a Sefer Torah. So what is the assumption behind that? Right. So what we seem to be saying is that there's something about the last psukim of the Torah, from the fact that I can read them and I don't need a minyan to be kovea reading them from a Sefer Torah. There's something about their kedusha that is lower than the kedusha of the rest of the Torah. Right. That's what the halacha, and there's halacha lemaisa implications of this. That's what Rav is saying. Now, obviously, today it doesn't matter because we always just read it as part of Simchat Torah. But in theory, if you wanted to read the last psukim of the Torah,
if you're in a place
that doesn't have a
you
minyan,
and another three guys.
yeah. So according to the Rambam, based on this, you'd be able to do that. Okay, and that's novea from this concept. There was something about the last psukim that was written on a lower level of kedusha than the rest of the Torah. So the Gemara asks, based on that halacha, lema Rabbi Yehudai. So let me assume that it's because Yoshua wrote it, and not that Moshe Rabbeinu wrote it. Because if Moshe Rabbeinu wrote it, why would there be a difference? Right. So the Gemara says, afilu tema Rabbi Shimon. You could even say, no, it's according to Rabbi Shimon. Hoel v'ishtanu ishtanu. That it's true Moshe Rabbeinu wrote it, but the fact that he wrote it in a different way, so it's different. And the fact that it's different, it means that it's different, even though it's still written by Moshe Rabbeinu.
The fact that it's different, it means it's different.
Hoel v'ishtanu ishtanu. That's what the Gemara says. Okay, so that's the Gemara in Bava Batra. Okay, if we'll notice here, there's a parallel version of this teaching in the Sifrei, but there are some slight differences. Okay, so Vayamot Sham Moshe. So Moshe died there. Efshar Shemet Moshe v'Kotef Vayamot Sham Moshe. Is it possible that Moshe Rabbeinu had died, and that after he died, he wrote that Moshe died there? Ela ad kan Moshe katav Moshe. מכאן ואילך כתב יהושע. Okay, so that's what we saw was the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda in the Bava Batra. אומר, הרי הוא אומר, וכתב משה את התורה הזאת. But it says Moshe wrote this Torah. אפשר שנתן משה את התורה כשהיא חסרה אפילו אות אחת. So here Rabbi Meir is kind of giving the objection that Rabbi Shimon gave in the Gemara of Batra. אלא מלמד שהיה משה כותב מה שאמר לקדוש ברוך הוא. כתוב כעניין שנאמר, ויאמר להם ברוך מפיו יקרא אליי. No, Moshe wrote the whole thing. So note here,
13 Torahs in one day.
Moshe Rabbeinu? Right, so on the last day of his life, the Midrash says that he wrote 13 Sifrei Torah, one for each of the Shvatim. Right. 13. Okay. On the last day of his life, he wrote 13 Sifrei Torah.
It's a rough way to go out. It's a rough way to go out.
Probably finally I can rest.
It can kill you.
Also, I mean, it's not there for temporary. That's not possible.
Isn't it supposed to
Obviously.
take 13 years, not 13 days?
Right, okay. So there's a Nes, yeah.
I mean, a day.
Or it was just finished work. Is there any opinion?
I think so, yeah.
You know what?
How long did it?
But even that, to do
How
13
long
times
did
in a
it-
day is a stretch.
How long did it take him to write one?
It's a good question.
5 times easier.
I don't know because I wasn't there, but
No,
yeah,
I mean,
good question. So what doesn't the opinion here in the Sifrei mention, by the way?
the tears.
The B'demah, right? It just says Moshe Rabbeinu. No, it's not that Yoshua did it. Moshe Rabbeinu wrote the whole thing. And it's like, maybe they're not bothered, like Shimon wasn't bothered. Okay, he wrote that he died, even though it hadn't happened yet. Okay. But the tears is missing. And then this is the new opinion. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, Bat kol yotzet mitoch hamachaneh, 12 mil al 12 mil. So a voice went out that was heard throughout the entire camp of Bnei Israel in the Midbar. Vayta machrezet v'omeret met Moshe. So it was almost like a bat kol wrote the end of the Sefer Torah, or at least gave a stamp of approval to the end of the Sefer Torah being written the way that it was. And then I'm not sure what this means. Samalion amar vayamot sham Moshe. I think that means, first of all, I don't know who Samalion is. And then the bat kol, it didn't say met Moshe, it said vayamot sham Moshe, like the actual psukim. So there's something, I don't know if anyone has an idea. I don't know exactly what this phrase is getting at here, but there is kind of this idea that there's also this third opinion that the bat kol maybe somehow dictated itself the last 8 psukim. So it's almost kind of in the opposite direction in the sense that, you say the rest of the Torah, Hashem dictated it to Moshe, and then there's a machloket. Was it lower, so Yoshua, or was it maybe the same, which was Moshe? And then in the Sefer you have, or maybe it was even more kadosh, because the bat kol wrote it, as it were.
Bat kol greater than Moshe, necessarily.
That was Shemaim. When the basket comes out, we learned it once.
We learned once that.
And we don't ask in that way because
Right.
it doesn't get to
We're
say.
not talking about halakha, we're talking about reality.
When does it say Vayichtav Moshe's Torah Zeis?
I think in Vailach. I think.
So
No,
like,
not in Vayela.
I mean,
Vailech, at the end of the Torah. Yeah.
right
Meaning
before those psukim?
the idea
Was
is
it- was
that
it
when
the
he
pasuk
says,
before?
meaning when it says that he wrote this Torah, it was before it says Vayamasham Moshe. So that means it was already finished. That must have included those psukim. How's that possible? Because
Yeah, but it wasn't the last pasuk before those 8 psukim.
no, it wasn't.
Right. So then it's like
In other words, he wrote the whole thing. Yeah. You're saying also Hazinu he had already written before he said it? What do you
Which is
mean?
fine though. Why is that a problem? It's just a
What?
problem if he writes about his death.
no, but if it says in the middle of the thing, he wrote this whole sefer. What sefer is it talking about?
Also after that part. No? I think the
He's
issue is
talking
that he's
about
writing about
himself.
his death, not about the timing.
Okay.
You're saying in the Torah, the fact that it says he wrote this Torah is a bit strange.
Yeah.
Okay, right. So yeah, well, I hear you. I mean that's shot in the
Saying
psukim.
if it could say it in the middle, it could also say he died.
What are you
in the
trying to
middle.
say with that?
And how does he know what
There
happened
shouldn't be a
before
question
he's
about
like,
when it says if he dies that he died
Because
because ein mukim l'morcha b'Torah.
no,
I think what's-
Torah means
When it happened.
it's totally fine to say that. Oh, but we saw that he died, but then we see him talking again. Here he said that he died. The question was, how can he say that in the book?
I thought it said it here, but then it didn't. Maybe it's in a later source. I think in some of them, maybe one of the Mefarshim brings a version which says. I think I mentioned this before. I remember seeing. Hopefully, we'll see it soon. That what's bothering these midrashim is specifically that would mean Moshe was lying. That's why it's so problematic for the Gemara. If he wrote Moshe died there when he's still alive, then he's lying about something that he wrote in the Torah. That specifically is what's bothering them, I think.
Number 2
Battling
is
cool.
Samalion. Is it possible to be the Malach HaMavet or
Yeah,
some
sounds
angel?
something like
Yeah. Samach Mem.
Sama, okay.
Like the
You said
Gospel
his full
said
name.
that Met Moshe Samalion Amar. Like maybe that's the thing, and then Vayamas Sham Moshe, and Moshe died there.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Maybe.
I don't know.
I don't. Very interesting. Okay.
What?
What's on the plan?
Basically the angel of death.
It's an interesting even the way you broke up that sentence was different than I'd read it, but it's very, very interesting. It could be. Like, you know, there's once the angel of death declared that Moshe was dead, then Moshe died, you're saying? Okay, very interesting. In the Sifrei, I think I've mentioned this in the past, we learned about Moshe having those 2 angels, Af and Chema, we did a few weeks ago, and then in the Midrash, there's this whole story about Moshe with the Malach HaMavet, they go back
you
and
said
forth.
that. Yada.
Yeah. Okay, very good. Shkoyach.
What's
Okay,
the seal?
well, quickly just, you know, the Marsha, we can even skip it because it's not really so relevant to what we're saying. Let's do the Ritva, okay? Because you guys mentioned the Ritva, and I think he kind of alludes to a different way of reading this story than what, you know, we'd traditionally kind of understood it to mean. So on the top is the Ritva, and it says Moshe Kotov, okay? Yesh shegorsin HaKadosh Baruch Hu Omer, Moshe Kotov. So there's some who have the Girsa, where HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, and Moshe wrote, ומכאן ואילך, but once it says וימות Moshe, there's last psukim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu Omer, ומשה כותב בדמע. That the Girsa is that the difference between the everything up to the last psukim, the last psukim is the aspect of dema, right? That Hashem said and Moshe wrote, but here Hashem said and Moshe wrote with tears. And the way to understand that is Perush, the Efresh Benehem, כי הראשונים נכתבים בדיו, והאחרונים נכתבים בדמע, right? So that's my girsa, the Ritva says, that the difference between the 2 sections is that Hashem dictated it all, but Moshe wrote everything up to the end in ink, and the last psukim in tears. Now, that was the actual writing, the way it was written was physically with his tears. V'chen katav Rabbeinu Meir Zal. And the Ritva says, but what you guys said, in the Perush, he said it's based on a different gears of the Gemara. They says v'yesh gorsin. There's some who have a different version of the Gemara, and it says as follows: Ad kan HaKadosh Baruch Hu Omer, uMoshe Omer veKotev. Kilomar, what does that mean? Shaya chozer hapasuk kodem shichtevenu mirov chiba kedei shelo yit'eba. That it says Hashem would say it, and Moshe would say it and write it. What does it mean Moshe would say it and write it? That before he wrote the words, he would repeat what Hashem had said to him in order to make sure that he wrote it correctly. He would say it himself. Okay, מכאן ואילך, HaKadosh Baruch Hu אומר, at the next picture, ומשה כותב בדמע. That the emphasis is not on the dema, the emphasis is on the fact that it doesn't say אומר the second time, right? Meaning, כלומר שהיה כותב ובוכה, the dema means ולא היה חוזר הפסוק מרוב צער. That the idea of the dema is not that he wrote with the tears, but that he used to repeat back what Hashem said, but here he was so upset with the fact that he was going to die that he didn't repeat it back. And that's the chidush of what it's saying with these last
Why
days.
was he upset that he's
Kind
gonna
of,
die?
yeah. Why was he upset?
Because he wasn't. He would. I think he died early. Because it was meant. If he was going to Israel, he would live longer, right?
Okay.
So he should cry.
Well,
So he should be crying already from when
But
Hashem
you
says
already
he's not
went
going
through
into
this in
Eretz Yisrael.
Hanan. He prayed like,
Yeah.
כמה תפילות אומרים שהוא התפלל לשמה?
Yeah, but now it's happening.
Oh,
You know.
now there's no.
But he
that's
doesn't
for
fit
real.
Moshe. He fits, doesn't seem like Moshe. I mean, think about it. He went with his brother all the way to Lahar and didn't cry there, even though he knew that Aaron's going to die. Now he's going to
Bill
cry.
Bechi.
He cried in Bet Hanan.
בית חנן. בית חנן שם ביתי. He bowed himself.
יש פער בימים, כאילו מה הפער בין ואת חנן למיטה שלו?
אני חושב
יכול
בערך
להיות
3 שבועות.
יכול להיות שזה
ממש
ממש
שכל
מעט
ספר
זמן.
דברים הוא בערך 3 שבועות.
זה יכול
Maybe
להיות
we have to look at it differently. Not
כמעט
why
כלום
did
זמן,
Moshe
ולכן
cry,
כאילו
but
הוא
he
עדיין
cried.
בשוק מהבשורה.
Now, like, what
הוא
does
נכנס,
that
לא יודע.
mean? Not why did he cry. כאילו, אפילו משה
The second
בכה.
pshat.
You know?
So
You know what I
what
mean?
I'm trying
Like,
to say is that if he
is it
We
like
have a certain
he's
persona,
human,
and
or
now
is it
we're
because
asking-
exactly?
I'm saying it doesn't fit Moshe because
Maybe like he's
I don't
human.
know,
He also
Zach,
doesn't want to die.
Moshe
You know?
Avraham didn't cry
Doesn't
when
think
they
your
told him.
understanding of Moshe.
Exactly.
Yeah, I just said that.
I know, but really, Moshe. Now you can understand him better. He did cry.
We don't know. We will never know, I guess.
Why not? He says he cries.
I want a passage that says he cried.
What?
I would
Who
say
cried?
the second thing that he was crying rather than the fact that he wrote it in tears
Yeah.
is that closes more loops because if he wrote it in tears, there's the whole medrash of I think it's a medrash where when he changed, he wrote less or he left out letters, so it's left over ink and then Hashem put it on his face and that's why his face was shining. You know what I'm talking about? You know what I'm talking about? He learned growing up. I forget where in the Torah Moshe leaves to leave out a letter or why does he have less ink?
Oh, I don't know. I know that after her Sinai, his face was glowing.
Correct. And the
Then
medrash
why?
is it's because Hashem takes the extra ink and he rubs it on his face. With Sefer Torah, but
It sounds familiar to me. What did he not write though?
I don't remember. It was something to do with like letters that are missing or shortened or something. But if whether that be that as it may,
Okay.
If you take this pshat and the last 8 psukim, he wrote them all in tears, then he has loads of leftover ink, which makes a whole set of problems.
Okay.
Doesn't
Second
necessarily
shot.
say that it's his tears. Also, it could be just tears.
Hashem gave
In the
God's
first-
ink for
tears or
everything and
something.
then tears.
In the first version, you're saying?
Yeah.
That's autistic.
He just found a jar of tears and wrote.
How is it
Are
going
we
to
sure
show
that
up?
Dema means
Human
that,
tears will show up as writing.
So the Ben Yehuda talks about that.
Are we sure that Dema means crying?
Okay, good. So the Vilna Gaon talks about that.
אם זה היה ה' זה היה הרבה יותר פשוט.
Shkoyach.
Good.
But I also would say that even according to the pshat that Moshe wrote it with tears, or that he wrote it without repeating, it still would explain that they're different psukim than the rest, and maybe that's why you could have do it b'yachid.
Which is what, we said, Afilu Tema Rabbi Shimon, Hol Vishnu Vishnu. Good. Okay. Let's do the Yun Yaakov quickly. Because he brings out the halachic aspect of this, where he says מכאן ואילך in the first picture. The Yun Yaakov is right beneath the Ritva on the first line. מכאן is in big letters. מכאן ואילך HaKadosh Baruch Hu אומר משה כותב והחילוק לפי גרסה זו שבשמונה פסוקים לא היה משה אומר אף על גב דקיימלן ביורדי הסימן רע"ד סעיף ב' שצריך שיקרא כל תיבה בפיו קודם שיכתבנה. That the halacha is a sofer stam who writes a sefer Torah. Before he writes a word, he's supposed to say the word out loud.
זה הלכה?
מה?
זה הלכה, כן?
זה הלכה, למעשה. Yeah, a sofer stam, he's supposed to say the word before he writes it.
But what word?
Any word of the Torah, as he's writing. Why? So that he doesn't make a mistake. In other words, if you say it out loud, the chances of you making a mistake are lower. right? Mikol makom, but then it says mikol makom. כיוון שאחר אומרה לפניו, מותר לכתוב כאילו הוא עצמו אמרה בפיו. And he says, but if someone else says the word, and you just listen as the sofer, so that's just as good, the halacha. So then Yaakov is tying that halacha back to this idea that like...
What if you don't do it at all?
Don't what?
You're saying when you read a Sefer Torah?
You need to say word as you write it?
Yeah, my assumption would be is it's b'diavad kosher anyway, but I need to check there in the Shulchan Aruch. That's a good question. But notice what he's saying here is that the fact that Moshe Rabbeinu in the last 8 psukim, that he wrote it bedema, but he didn't say it, so it's still okay halachically because HaKadosh Baruch Hu had said it, and he heard Hashem say it. So don't worry, right? In other words, about that's what the Yaakov is trying to be mepalpel here. Yeah, what were you saying?
The Archaim is when the extra drop of ink. It was all humbleness because Moshe he wrote on off, and he was writing by himself. He left out the yud, and with Vayikra he made the aleph small, which was both like him being humble.
Okay,
So
got
he
it.
used the extra drop of ink, and he put on his face, and that's what made his face shine when he came down.
Wait, now I can go see.
Okay. I thought you were going to say, right, in Parshat Tetzaveh, his name doesn't appear. Right? It's the only Parsha where Moshe's name doesn't appear. Because Moshe says, V'ima'in mechenina misifrecha asher katavta. And then Hashem says, fine, I'll leave out your name. But then, because he was sacrificed himself for Bnei Yisrael. I thought that's where you were going, but no. Okay, shkoyach, thank you. So you're saying there's already precedent for him not writing specific letters, and Hashem kind of filling it in. Okay, yeah, very good. All right, in any event, so that's the Yun Yaakov. Okay, let's look now at the Anaf Yosef and then the Ben Yoyada. So the Anaf Yosef, he brings a chiddush in the Vilna Gaon, which I thought was very sharp, as I said before. The Anaf Yosef, on the first picture, it says Moshe katav bedema. Okay, Hagra katav. Okay, so the Vilna Gaon wrote, הכוונה משום שלכאורה קשה, הלא כל התורה כולה הייתה נכתבת 2,000 שנה קודם בריאת העולם. So he's saying, whoa. You guys jumped right in. You're missing some basic assumptions here. I thought the Torah was the blueprint of all the creation. I thought the Torah was written before, right? Istakel kutsha brichu be'oraito bari alma, right? So he telling me that now Moshe, he didn't write these psukim. These psukim were carved into the fabric of reality before reality even existed. So what is this whole discussion about?
Carved into what? Who carved in when?
HaKadosh Baruch Hu, he looked into the Torah as a blueprint of creation.
As a what?
A blueprint, instructions on how to build the world.
IKEA.
But he knows everything. Why does he need an
It's called blueprint because it was.
It's a good question. The idea behind the
What were the
Midrash,
instructions?
the idea behind the Midrash, the Torah is instructions on how all of creation works. The purpose behind creation is what we can find in the Torah. Right? So ואם כן, לא היה עדיין השמיים והארץ וכל אשר בה, ודור המבול, ודור הפלגה, ויציאה ממצרים, ודומיהם. In other words, the Torah existed before. What? I think that's it. In other words, all these things were written out in advance, he says. You're having such a hard time that it says Vayamot Shem Moshe, but he wrote about everything before. It was all dictated or decided. What?
The difference between the Torah being eternal and having existed before the world, and Moshe writing him by himself. Like Moshe doesn't have the license
to say that he died.
Yeah, I think there's a nuance there, no?
Yeah, but I think that this is how he understands the Gemara's question. Like here, you understand that he is reading the question is saying the issue is how could he have written something that didn't happen? So he's asking on that. But everything was written before it happened. But that's how he understood. It's different. Maybe that'll be the answer.
Mm-hmm.
Where is the Anaf Shimon?
One day.
אוקיי, ואיך נכתבו בתורה קודם שהיו בעולם? אמנם זה ידוע, כי כל התורה שמותיו של הקדוש ברוך הוא. Right? The Torah is really just all these different names of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Right? והיינו על ידי צירופים של אותיות ותיבות. Right, so we're getting into a bit Kabbalistic here, but you take the different psukim, you arrange them in certain ways. No?
The words of God is Tanya.
Tanya, yeah. That the Torah is really just combinations of the different names of Hashem, right? ולפני בריאת העולם הייתה התורה המון אצל הקדוש ברוך הוא על פי צירופים וסודות נעלמים. So before the world was created, he claims it's not that it said, and this was the Dor HaMabul and they did the XYZ, and this was the Dor HaFlagah that did XYZ. but rather it was the names of Hashem in this kind of pure primordial state that Torah existed. Not that the actual events as they're written in the Torah that we have today, but mixed up with these kind of secretive combinations of letters that would eventually be revealed to be the text that we have. Okay? Right? It wouldn't have been read, it's kind of silly what he's saying here in the sense that it wasn't read back then the way we read it today, meaning before any creation existed. Not that anyone was reading it, but the idea was that it doesn't mean the Torah as we have it today, you pull it off the shelf. That's not what existed before B'riat HaOlam.
It was written in zeros and ones.
It was written in, right. It was written in some code, divine code. That's what it means, right? Rak al pi shmotav shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. After Hashem created reality, he gave the Torah to Yisrael, and he gave them the mitzvot. That kind of forced the Torah to be bound within the limitations of space and time. Okay? Katav et Torah be'er hetev ech lasot kol mitzvot. So then the Torah was given in a way that the Yisrael can understand it. V'chalak kol Torah letevot ve'otiyot legalot lefaresh et kol divrei Torah azot. And it was divided up into letters and words. The text that we have today is kind of this emanation of this divine code that existed before creation. Okay? V'sodot Torah al pi tzirufim nitna li'odeichen. But then, the Kabbalists, they understand how to kind of unpack the code and read back into what there was originally. This isn't something that everybody knows how to do. Okay. What does this have to do with what we were talking about? Here, I knew it. Okay, that the problem he's saying is that how could Moshe Rabbeinu have lied? Okay. But the fundamental question of Rabbi Shimon, he says, is it possible that when it says Lakoch et Sefer Torah Zeh, that the Torah was missing a letter in Vailech? The problem is that the whole Torah was already dictated back in the day, back before the day, before there was even time, right?
Before there was before.
L'chach amar she'ad kan HaKadosh Baruch Hu Omer u'Moshe Omer v'Koteb, and this is the sharp read of the Vilna Gaon. So until this point of Vayamot Sham Moshe, HaKadosh Baruch Hu would dictate, he would say. Moshe would say it, would repeat what Hashem said, and he would write it. רוצה לומר שאמר משה כל תיבה ותיבה כאשר היא כתובה בידינו בגלוי המצוות. That Moshe would repeat back what HaKadosh Baruch Hu said and wrote in the sense that he took this divine code and translated it into words that people could understand. That's what that means, אומר וכותב. So then what's the difference with the last eight psukim?
Why, what it says in the Torah?
Yeah, אבל
to
מכאן...
Aramit?
No, into Ivrit. The Torah is in Hebrew.
He did from Aramit to Ivrit?
No, he did.
Machine language.
He did from Hashem spoke to him, and then he wrote it in Hebrew. Okay?
But how did he understand that?
Because he's Moshe.
It was Moshe Rabbeinu. He had a level of nevuah that no one else has been able to reach, or will ever be able to reach. Right? Aval מכאן ואילך. Good question. From this point on, so then what's with the last psukim? לא היה יכול לכתוב בגילוי וימות שם משה. He couldn't write, right? Moshe died, because he was the one writing. Demech ze keshikra, because that would be like he was lying. And Moshe Rabbeinu can't be someone who's like, it looks like he's lying. וגם לא היה יכול לגמור על ידי יהושע. But it also couldn't have been finished by Yoshua.
Why?
Why? כי אפשר ספר תורה חסר אות אחת, right? It can't be that the Sefer Torah was missing any letters when he gave it in Parshat Vailech. It had to have been written all the way to the end of Vizot HaBachra. So he says, it can't be like Rabbi Nehemiah and Rabbi Yehuda said, that it was written by Yoshua, because the Torah was given in Vailech, it was finished. Mitzad Sheni, Moshe couldn't have written it the way it's written, because that would be Mechzek Shikra. So where does that leave us? So he says, L'chach hu Omer shaya koteb bedema, that he wrote a bedema. What does that mean? V'perush hu milashon meleatcha v'dimatcha. What is meleatcha v'dimatcha? The dimatcha is like your produce. It has to do with like halachot of Ruma and Maser, I think, right? That you have to give from your dema. And what is the dema? And the Vilna Gaon says, Milashon meduma v'irbuv otiyot. That dema is like a produce that's mixed up. That you don't know what's the tevel and what's the truma. What?
Maybe Demai.
Demai. Ani yodea, but he says also there's Milashon meduma. Apparently... There's Dema and then there's the Meduma, which the Vilna Gaon says means.
No, it's meant to be the same root.
Where's מלאתך ודימתך?
Good.
מדומה is
זה אחר.
נכון, מדומה שזה מעורבב. תפתח פה
It might be in Mishnayot also, huh?
עשר התרומות.
תפתח פה ספר, למעשה שם, אין פה משניות.
So what does he say? So he says Meduma, it's like from Hilchot Maaser, that you have things that are mixed up, okay?
When
So-
Truma falls into Chulin.
Right, okay? Okay, so he says, so therefore, when it says, so what is the Vilna going to say? He says, מכאן, עד כאן, HaKadosh Baruch Hu היה אומר, ומשה רבינו היה כותב, אומר וכותב. מכאן ואילך HaKadosh Baruch Hu אומר, from this point Hashem said, ומשה היה כותב, בדמע. So what does it mean, בדמע? So like mixed up. שהיה כותב מכאן ואילך על פי צירופי תיבות, שהם שמותיו של הקדוש ברוך הוא, ולא היה נקרא כלל, ויעמוד שם משה. רק תיבות אחרות על פי סודות התורה. That Moshe Rabbeinu wrote the last 8 psukim mixed up. He wrote the words of the Torah, but he didn't write them in a way that was intelligible, in the ones with letters, but in a
He
code.
didn't know because he was told not to finish it.
Because he couldn't say Vayamot Sham Moshe, because then he'd be lying, and he wouldn't. But he had to write the whole Torah, right? So the way the Vilna Gaon solves that is he wrote the whole Torah. He just didn't write the last 8 psukim in the right order, but it was still written down by Moshe. But he wasn't lying because it didn't say Vayamot Sham Moshe, right? He kept the last 8 psukim in this pure divine state without the Omer ve'Kotov of translating it into the words that made it into the Sefer Torah. And then who did that last step of translating it into the psukim that we have today? ולאחר מיתתו, כתבן יהושע כפי שניתן לו רשות לגלות התורה. Then Yoshua came and unmixed up after Moshe died and said, this really means Vayamot Sham Moshe, with his Ruach HaKodesh.
הנה אתה רואה, נעשית מדומה, שם המצא של חודש, כן? מדומה זה...
Medumeh with an ayin is right, it's mixed up.
Thank you.
So he says, Dema, we've been totally wrong. Dema doesn't mean tears. It has nothing to do with Moshe crying. He wrote it, Kotv bedema means he wrote it meduma. He wrote the letters mishmashed. And that resolves all the issues that we had until now. So it's very sharp.
Basically, he wrote it, but didn't write it.
Right. ואם כן, באמת, he even says this explicitly here, ואם כן, באמת כתבן משה, ולא חסר אפילו אות אחת. Right? When Rabbi Shimon says, is it possible that even one letter was missing? No letter was missing. They were just written in the wrong places. But all the letters were written in, what? Instead of Vayamot Sham Moshe, it was whatever. Yeah, something like that. Okay? רק כי חטא פסוקים אלו לא היה יכול לכתוב את הנגלה וכתב לפי הצירופים. וזהו בדמע ויהושע כתבן לפי הנגלה. Okay, so that's the chidush of the Vilna Gaon. Let's just conclude here with the Ben Yoyada. He says as follows. הגאון מווילנה ז"ל, פרש לשון מדומה, okay, דמוע. רצונו לומר אותיות מעורבות זה בזה, ואינם חלוקים לתיבות, right? You didn't have them divided up into the words that we have it today. ואחר שנפטר, and after Moshe Rabbeinu died, חלקום לתיבות ככתוב לפנינו. ויש מפרשים בדמעות שלו, right? And there's some who interpret this other one, the more traditional understanding, like the Ritzel said.
means just without spaces?
It also means mixed up, like the letters were not in the same order.
אינם חלוקים לתיבות means like...
מעורבות זה בזה, ואינם חלוקים לתיבות, I think.
Okay, fine.
I think, yeah.
Just all the letters.
Right.
So,
It's like Bible code, stuff.
Yeah.
So it's, yeah. Okay. ויש מפרשים בדמעות שלו, כתבם ולא בדיו, right? He wrote them with his tears and not with ink. And now see what the Ben Yoyada says.
כי היה זה ביום השבת.
כי היה זה ביום השבת. So apparently Moshe Rabbeinu, when he finished the Sefer Torah, Dorashi doesn't quote the source, I couldn't find it, that it was on Shabbat. What's the problem? ואסור לכתוב בדיו. You're not allowed to write on Shabbos. So how could Moshe Rabbeinu have finished the Torah on Shabbos?
Oh, this is good.
ורק במשקים אסור לכתוב מדרבנן, right? You're not allowed to write בדיו מדאורייתא, but you're allowed to write with mashkin midirabanan. So how does that solve the problem? If he wrote it with his tears, so it's only aser with tears midirabanan. V'adayin lo gazer rabbanan b'zeh, because that only happened thousands of years later.
Except if you're doing nevuah and you can't have both ways. If you're already seeing into the future, you got to know the shot.
Maybe.
You don't know what the one and hold.
Wait, maybe
Wait, what did he wait with on
Maybe he came to
Shabbat?
Hashem, like when he
Don't
didn't
make
What
it
did he wait with
complicated.
on Shabbat?
I'm just
The,
saying,
the,
you
Mo-
understand
the Moshe
problem.
Rabbeinu, there's one opinion that he finished writing the Sefer Torah. The end of the Sefer Torah he wrote with his tears.
But how?
So that's what he says right now. Look at what he says right now. Mipnei she'en ze davar mitkayem, right? Because his tears is not something that's mitkayem. The isur min Torah of writing is only something that is mitkayem. But then, what's the question? So, how did the tears last? Which is a question that we should have asked, and I think we asked even earlier.
You get lost, you can't see them.
Right. Ve'ate Yoshua achar Shabbat. Yoshua must have come after Shabbat was over. V'asa lehem avarat kulumus b'dio. Al kan darav. So then Yoshua traced over them until after Shabbat.
How did he make the shape of the letters with his tears?
Maybe
He
just
wrote
could
them.
Read what
Also,
it
it
was.
would work if it was paper, but if it was,
Rock, what was it?
if it's what a Torah is
cloth,
made out of,
yeah.
then it doesn't absorb.
Okay, so בזה פירשו סימד דמטרים בדרך ככהן, פירוש אין אומרים במלך שבים הדמעות, לכך המלך דוחה את צוותו, שנכתב סופו בדמעות על כאן דבריו. ולפי דבריהם, but he says, according to that, צריך לומר, נשאר רושם הכתיבה בדמעות עד אחר שבת בדרך נס. You have to say that it was a miracle that the tears, they managed to stay on the cloth and retain their form until after Shabbat, and then Yeshua jumped in and traced over them with ink, and then that gave them their form. So what's beautiful about this pshat of the Ben Yehuda? He combines, he resolves the contradiction between the two opinions in Bava Batra, right? Because Bava Batra said, who wrote the last 8 psukim? Yoshua wrote them. But then the other opinion says, no, Moshe Rabbeinu wrote them bedema. So the answer is they're both true. Because Moshe wrote them bedema, and afterwards Yeshua wrote
He
them.
didn't say the reason he was crying. Was he crying like, I have to cry to make sure that Yeshua knows what to do? Or was he crying because
Because
it's
that's real Mesiras Nefesh. Like I need to cry. I need to write this. I can't write this. I'm going to die today. I have to do it with a mashkim and this. It's derabana.
Not deliberately.
He was crying because he didn't want to love all of them.
Couldn't you what?
Up in the sky, example.
Okay.
Why is he up
All right, and just to conclude, בזה נפרש בסייעתא דשמיא דקדוק גדול בכתוב, שאמר, when Moshe dies at the end, it says, ומשה בן 120 שנה במותו, he was 120 years old, לא חטא עינו ולא נס לחו, right? His eyes did not dim and his strength did not leave him, right? Moshe Rabbeinu, he maintained his physical strength till the end of his life.
One is the eye and one
So he
is
says,
the
"V'kashe kevan de'amar lo nas lecho." It says that his strength didn't leave him. Lama paret al ha'ayin b'fnei atzmo. Why do you have to say lo chatayino? You don't have to say his eye didn't dim if you're saying that his strength never left him. So isn't it repetitive? U'bazeh nicha. But boy, what we just said, you can interpret this to mean kevan de'katav b'dmaot. Since he wrote the last psukim at the end of his life in tears, al tachshov dekahu einav miribui admaot. Don't think he was crying so much, right? That it affected his eyes. Sheyardu kenachal, that he must have shed tears like a stream. Hilkach katav bahem lo katayino. That's why it says specifically that his eyes didn't dim, despite the fact that he had to write the end of the Torah with his tears.
למה חזק?